of a fifth Indiana Jones movie has kind of felt like this horrific inevitability for the past decade or so. They've only officially confirmed it since like 2016, but let's be real, they've been discussing this since 2011, 2012. It's been a bit of a hot button issue pretty much since Crystal Skull came out. Also, since officially announcing a fifth Indiana Jones movie, they've moved the release date back twice. The first time moving from 2019 to 2020, and then again from 2020 to 2021. The last time they announced that they were moving the release date, they also basically said, we're doing an unofficial writer's room, which basically means, someone please tell us what to write this movie about. We're desperate. And I actually filmed this video a couple of weeks ago with the idea of basically outlining my dream plot for an Indiana Jones movie, but that video was really, really terrible and also really, really horribly lit. So instead, today I'm going to go through my bullet point wish list of everything I think would work really well in a fifth Indiana Jones movie. And if Jonathan Kasdan wants to contact me to talk, I'll leave my business email in the description. I don't have a business email. Point number 1. A reboot. Everything in Hollywood these days seems to subsist entirely upon it either being rebootable or sequel baity or anything like that. So Spielberg has already expressed an interest in rebooting Indiana Jones after the current iteration, which I actually don't really like the idea of, solely because I don't think you can really get another actor to play Indiana Jones as well as Harrison Ford could. And also, we saw how well it went last time we tried to recast Harrison Ford in any role, and in the case of Han, it was literally just a young version of Han. It wasn't even like a new character or a new continuity or anything. So I propose, instead of rebooting the series with a female protagonist, we just have a female protagonist be introduced in the fifth movie that gets a spin-off series if the fifth movie gets a lot of really good reception and does really well financially. Another really good thing about introducing the female character as a part of the Indiana Jones series first and then giving her a spin-off is that you can sort of establish her as a character and also give her you know, coming of age aspect of her story before you even dive into the action-based part of her story. So basically you could have the confident Indiana Jones-esque character in her own series, but while she's in the Indiana Jones series, you definitely see her at a more vulnerable part in her life, so it makes her more compelling as a character without having to drag too much plot baggage into a movie that's really and truly not at all about the plot. Number 2, the story. I really like the idea of the plot of this movie having something to do with Atlantis. I know that's like a weird thing that I keep bringing up every time I mention Indiana Jones, but I just want them to go to Atlantis. I think it would be really fun. I don't know, it's a good thing that lots of people know about. You don't have to inform too much about what Atlantis is and like the backstory of how Atlantis happened. And it's also vague enough that you could do kind of whatever you wanted with it. It could be like the Atlanteans have like a weird, creepy death cult, or the Atlanteans are just like so futuristically advanced, especially compared to like the 1960s, where I'm assuming the fifth Indiana Jones movie would take place, that, you know, they just seem so removed from reality. Like, there's so much you could do with Atlantis, and I just feel like it would work really well. Another plot that I find particularly interesting is the haunted castle idea that was originally going to be Temple of Doom before they scrapped it. They also included this haunted castle as the potential like opening adventure for the third Indiana Jones movie, but they decided to cut it in favor of like the backstory thing. And you see a little bit of it in the castle where the Nazis are hiding out, but it's not at all the same thing. So I would really like for them to explore that, because that's another thing that you could do a whole lot with and no one would really get offended by it, because it's not a real thing. It just exists. It's basically magical, you can do whatever the heck you want with it kind of deal. Basically, I want the plot to revolve around a quest objective that's very easy to manipulate to be interesting in terms of the story. I kind of want a MacGuffin that's actually interesting and has these magical powers that are useful throughout the entire movie, because I think that was actually something interesting that was brought up in Crystal Skull. The fact that the skull actually does something throughout the movie instead of just at the very end like most of the other ones. Number 3, the villain. I know Spielberg said no more Nazis, but we're living in an age where we have a lot of Nazis. So can we please have the Nazis back, Spielberg? It's the 60s. The Nazis are like completely voluntary Nazis who aren't quite as heavily tied into like horrific events like the Holocaust. Like they weren't alive for that, or if they were very small children. So instead they're just emulating a really bad behavior. So you don't feel nearly as bad about punching them because you're not doing it necessarily at the expense of millions of people who died, or also at the expense of people who were maybe brainwashed or fooled into this banality of evil type deal. I don't know. It's a lot less heavy if it's neo-Nazis, because these are people who just actively choose to be bad people. Like any good Indiana Jones movie, the Nazis should be the background villains. They shouldn't be like the main villains. So I like the idea of the main villain being like this guy who stole Indiana's identity in his like retirement or something. I really like the idea of him being played by Chris Pratt, because I think it's the only time that Chris Pratt's D-list Harrison Ford impression would actually work out really well. I mean, don't get me wrong, I really like Andy Dwyer, but I don't like Peter Quill. And while I haven't seen the Jurassic World movies, from what I can tell, the character from Jurassic World is basically just Peter Quill, but without any sense of irony or acknowledging the fact that Peter Quill is kind of not that good of a person. It doesn't have to be Chris Pratt, it could be kind of any other dude, but I like the idea of it being Chris Pratt, because I also think it would be funny because people have always speculated that he's gonna take over Indiana Jones at some point, but if they put him in as a villain who the villains in Indiana Jones always die and he dies, it's like, well, that didn't happen. Another villain I think would be interesting, and I think this would work really well with the Haunted Castle thing, is like a Dr. Facilier style villain who's maybe like a true occultist, not like, you know, like Indiana being an expert on the occult. Like this is someone who actually wants to use occult things for bad. And maybe you could have like a counterpoint to that, like the good side of the occult spirituality or something. And then you have the bad side of it, and the whole movie's about finding a balance. And I think I just accidentally turned Indiana Jones into Star Wars, I'm sorry. Either way, I think it would be cool. And also this villain could be a lady again. I thought I would be fine with that. Or the lady who takes over from Indiana Jones could be a lady too. It could all be ladies. I'm not excluding gender. I just think it would be funny if it was Chris Pratt. Number 4. Carrying over canon from other movies. This is a really short point, but I feel like I need to make it, because if I don't, I'm gonna leave it out, or it's gonna not have the impact that I think it should. So here's what I think needs to happen. We forget everything from Crystal Skull except for Marion. Like, Mutt, gone. Let's not mention Mutt. We can mention Mutt maybe once to appease the nitpicky, like, Beauty and the Beast is about Stockholm Syndrome crowd. But other than that, we don't need to acknowledge that he existed. Like, Short Round vanished, and no one really seems to care where Short Round went other than me, so let's just have Mutt vanish in the exact same way. And kind of the beauty of the Indiana Jones franchise is that it's completely episodic. It's not like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter, where you have to kind of watch it in order to make sense of what's going on. You can kind of watch the Indiana Jones series in any order you want them to, especially the original 3, and they all make sense because the only reoccurring theme that any of them has is Indiana is there, and sometimes Marcus and Sala show up. Also, usually it's very seldom mentioned anything that happened in the previous movies anyway, like the artifact or anything. So just carry over that Indy and Marion are married, because I feel like it's kind of a moot point to have them get married and then like Marion either die or they get divorced or something like that. So the only thing from Crystal Skull that should carry over is Marion. And maybe we get a few mentions of things that happened, but otherwise I don't really care. And I don't really care to remember that Crystal Skull happened. Number 5, Sala. That's it. Just Sala. He doesn't have to be in the movie for very long. You know, he could just show up for like 1 or 2 scenes and do something helpful and be like Indy's guy in the chair. That's all that has to happen. Just Sala's a good luck charm for this franchise. They need John Rhys Davies or else the movie is bad. That's all I've come to the conclusion of. Number 6, theme. Anyway, I think something really unique to the Indiana Jones movies is that they don't always explore a theme, but when they do, it's usually the exact same theme over and over again. Like, they did the father-son theme twice now. Raiders' only theme was Nazis are bad, which is a big mood. And Temple of Doom was a fever dream. Not an incompetent fever dream, but definitely a mildly racist fever dream. So the themes I would really like to see explored in this movie are maybe aging, but, you know, in a way that's not made at the expense of like a cheap laugh or Mutt being really obnoxious.
Get on, Chris!
You know, maybe Indy thinks he's too old to do this, and then he realizes, wait, I can do anything I want because I'm a human and humans have limitless capabilities to be great and do wonderful things. And also I'm being played by Harrison Ford, who will be doing stunts when he's on oxygen in a wheelchair. Another thing I really want to see explored is maybe like mother-daughter themes or mother-son themes. Like Indy's mom exists sort of as like this very sensitive subject for both him and his dad. So maybe actually bringing her to the forefront would be interesting. Like maybe the artifact, and especially like the Haunted Castle movie, would be that the artifact can allow you to communicate with or bring back the dead. And the Nazis wanted to communicate with Hitler or something like that. Whereas Indy is more interested in just preserving the stone, but once he realizes what it's capable of, he's like, I could talk to my dad. I could talk to my mom. And I don't know if they wiped Indiana Jones canon like they did Star Wars canon when they moved it over. I don't think they did. But I wouldn't be surprised if they did for this movie. Perhaps Indy's mom died under like mysterious circumstances, or she died with something that Indy really felt like he needed to tell her. Or just in general, when someone dies when you're really young, you still lack a lot of that closure that you might get as an adult, because you're able to actually comprehend, sort of to an extent, or as much as any living person can, death and like how it works. Whereas when you're a kid, it's like, oh, this person was here and now they're gone, and now I have horrific trauma that has lasted into adulthood. I'm totally not projecting. Anyway, you go with that. And also, if you have this new female character, she could have a relationship with Marion, and that's the mother-daughter relationship. Like, maybe the character's relationship with her own mother isn't that good. Like, her mother's dead, or her mother was absentee after her father died, or something. You know? Something like that. And it's a story about motherhood, but, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be hyper-feminine, because there aren't that many non-hyper-feminine mother-daughter stories out there. The only one I can really think of off the top of my head is, like, Brave. And I think Marion deserves a chance to redeem herself as being a cool badass mom, rather than just being like, Mutt, don't do that! Mutt, go back to school, Mutt! Number 7, I think. It might be 6. It might be 8. I can't remember. All of the other miscellaneous crap that I couldn't fit into another category. I already mentioned Short Round. Please tell us where Short Round went. He doesn't actually have to be in the movie. I think the guy who played Short Round actually isn't in Hollywood anymore, or if he is, I think he might be a stunt coordinator. I can't really remember. But, like, just please, I want to know where he went. Is he okay? Did he go on to be an archaeologist too? Like, if we establish that he's still around and he's fine, you could actually maybe bring him back in the spin-off series. So, you know, you have like these recurring characters between the two series. It would be interesting. Anyway, where is Short Round? Justice for Short Round. Where did he go? We could recast him with another Chinese American actor. I mean, he was a kid, you know? I think globe-trotting should be a definite part of this, and I think this is something that Spielberg would agree with, because I do think I remember him saying he wanted it to be more globe-trotty, like some of the earlier Indiana Jones movies, because like the last two, they spent most of their time in like the desert or Mexico or wherever it was that they went in Crystal Skull. They don't really specify. This time maybe you could do some globe-trotting in like Western Europe, like you go to like Paris and Rome and all these other like iconic European cities, and it's set in like the fashionable but also very tumultuous 60s. So, you know, there's drama and intrigue and really, really cool fashion. I just really like 60s fashion. Please put a female character in there who gets more than 2 outfits, Lucasfilm. I want to see her wear 60s fashion. In terms of the characters, I really like the idea of the new female character definitely being sort of like an outcast who doesn't really have very many friends, and she's trying to make friends. Maybe she like grew up really ugly or weird or something and randomly got hot when she went off to university. So like she has no social skills whatsoever, but she's like, please be friends with me, I'm very lonely. Not projecting at all again, only I didn't get hot. I think her learning her self-worth will not only get you like brownie points with the moms who are kind of nervous about letting their young daughters watch like hardcore action movies, but you would also definitely have this much deeper layer to the story than just punch punch, because I don't think all of the Indiana Jones movies really meet their full potential in terms of having characters have arcs, which is fine. Not every character needs an arc. I don't understand why there's this big complaint that like Indy doesn't really have anything to do with the plot of Raiders. Like, the point of Raiders isn't that Indy does stuff, it's that you're watching a bunch of explosions happen and it's fun and tightly paced. Like, I'm sorry, the big bazinga theory that a movie made almost 40 years ago doesn't meet your modern day storytelling standards. And tell me again how I should watch Game of Thrones, even though I have no interest in watching a billion violent sex scenes. Back to the Atlantis plot idea. This has nothing to do with anything but aesthetics. Please put giant wall-to-wall, floor-to-ceiling fish tanks in Atlantis if you do Atlantis, Spielberg. I think it would look really cool. Also for Atlantis, I like the idea that like they don't actually prove Atlantis exists, and they like bring back like this very priceless ancient Greek necklace or something, and they bring it back to civilization and they're like, we found this in Atlantis, and everyone's like, you did what, mate? Yeah, no, Atlantis isn't a thing, but you did find this eerily well kept priceless Greek artifact, so we're gonna give you a couple $1 million for that. And there are other ideas I have, but I'm not gonna share them all, because if Lucasfilm wants me to co-write this movie with John Kasdan, I am so down. Just again, business email in the description. I don't have a business email, why do I keep saying that? I just have needs and things that I need to see in an Indiana Jones movie before the franchise ends. So Disney, call me, please. I don't want to actually have to go to school. Number 8. I'm in the movie, and I become best friends with Harrison Ford, and everything is great, and I